Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
He's also so lovable and laughable. I mean, I kind of wish that there were more instances of Quark being used as a character like that in DS9, but well, granted, there are other times. I mean, there was the time that they did have him as a clothed female Ferengi. That was that was quite the thing. So, oh, hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the show. We are. I don't want to call it a commiseration. I don't really want to call it a death nail. We're not doing any sort of, shall we say, service for the potential passing of a franchise. We're more going to take a look at it from a medical examiner standpoint. How about that? How about we go that way? I guess it could be considered a living autopsy because I technically the franchise isn't dead and will never truly be completely dead. But is it as healthy as it used to be?
Well, we technically have a franchise here where it's a person hanging off a cliff by 3 fingers. And while they're hanging off the cliff, we are just examining those fingers while someone else is standing ready with a fucking hammer just to see if they can hit them.
Yeah.
Oh, Brandon, I've seen what you've said in the chat so far, and I'm just curious. How much of Discovery, Picard, and Lower Decks have you actually seen? Because I will give you that. Star Trek Enterprise, as a series, was a departure from what, by that point, was the norm for Star Trek. However, it's not the worst Trek out there. And that's saying something because it arguably has the worst intro song.
Hey, I like the intro song to Enterprise.
The song itself is fine. It's not a terrible song. But it doesn't fit for a Star Trek show.
I suppose that's fair enough.
It's going to be a little bit more ominous with the music.
Well, okay, so Discovery tried with that ominous route, but it's more that the melodic, the floating essence of the piece is what really shines through when you actually listen to it. The theme song is supposed to get you into the proper mindset from your mental acuity standpoint to fit what the show is going to be tackling. The theme used for TOS fit it perfectly. Next Generation, that's where you started to get the sense that this isn't your father's Trek, but it was still good. Yes, it faced its critics, but it was still a lot better than what people were initially harping on it for. Deep Space Nine, Voyager, those theme songs get you right in the mindset, right into the depths of what those series were about and going to be addressing.
Yeah, there's the theme song for Deep Space Nine. It was definitely good. Da, 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 da. Oh, I can't do the music. Otherwise, you get the point.
But with that, though, wouldn't you say that Voyager and Discovery are the worst ones just because of how they try to get you into the mood for it? Voyager being so up and down to call the Yo-Yo Show, and Discovery being, yeah.
Well, Discovery.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's why I've still never watched Discovery.
You're not really missing much.
I know I'm not watching
yeah,
it.
I know, but shouldn't you watch it for completeness sake or
No,
review sake?
that was for Picard. I did that for Picard, not Discovery.
Yeah, from what I hear, Picard is a big pile of.
It was trying too hard to be a mix of every popular show from the past 10 years. As a matter of fact, as that series was actually being released, I'm not saying aired because it was released to streaming services on a weekly basis, we would watch it in the Discord server. As a matter of fact, I still have the entire season publicly available through the Google Drive link in the Discord server in Quark's Bar. Here's... What was it? Episode 3 when they finally got off-world into a
I
place of
believe so, yeah.
notable traveling? And it was during
Yeah.
that episode where it hit me. Star Trek Picard was trying to be the Pokemon of sci-fi.
Wait, what? Why? How? What?
It was trying to collect them all. Because when you look at it, its writing and art direction had influences from Game of Thrones, The Expanse, and pretty much every popular sci-fi or fantasy series that had any semblance of success since 2010.
What about Firefly?
Firefly did not have the commercial success, it had the fandom success. And that is my biggest criticism with CBS is they don't care about the fandom, they care about the money.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that every corporation though, to some degree?
But when
somewhat.
when that fandom is the ones who are spending the money to keep your business going, you kind of don't want to piss them off.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Just generally, yeah, definitely, I agree with you.
Because CBS, in their infinite wisdom, decided to release season 1 of Discovery on their regular broadcasting this past year. It was beat out in the ratings by reruns of game shows. Let that sink in, everyone. This flagship series that was supposed to carry the CBS, now Paramount Plus, streaming service was beat out in the ratings by reruns of a call-in game show. Masked Singer, for one of them. Shows that people already knew who the winner was and who it was behind the mask. People still opted to watch that instead of the then new to them series that was supposed to be the hallmark and the herald of the franchise going forward.
Well, one of the two alternatives doesn't really make you feel like you want to smash your head against the wall afterwards.
Yeah, and what really prompted all this is in the past 2 days, Generation Films and Generation Trek have released videos on their channels. The first one that caught my eye was Generation Films, where British Ben actually posed the question, is Star Trek dead? But then goes further to say, well, it's not dead, but here's how we can fix it. That video honestly was better suited a year ago. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we could actually talk to him and find out and actually get confirmation on my suspicion that the bulk of the script was actually written a year ago.
Could have
They,
been. Knowing them. I mean, and it's definitely, yes, I love their content, but they're quite a sizable channel, and there's sometimes that scripts are pushed off.
well, now I do have a feeling that they are trying to play the journalist route, and they don't want to be overly critical of one of the largest media companies in the world. But even then, you have to have enough integrity and gall to actually honestly review and talk about something that's being offered. Which is why I will never say that Discovery and Picard and Lower Decks are not Star Trek because, well, as unfortunate as it is, they were produced, released, and put to air in its various ways with the Star Trek logo, with that branding by the company that owns the IP. That doesn't mean we have to accept it, because I will continue to quote the future ruler of Earth, Doomcock, from his lair at the center of the Earth, and say, without respect, we must reject. It is true for the Star Wars franchise, it is true for the Star Trek franchise, it is true for any IP, any entertainment franchise out there that you enjoy. If you feel as though the people in charge of it are being disrespectful to the fandom by how they are handling the property, you are not obligated to continue supporting those venues financially in any way, shape, or form.
And with something now like what we can see, for example, in Star Wars, you have a huge schism in Star Wars in regards to, do people want to go with the Favreau route or the Kennedy route? And voting with the Walt in this case can make a huge difference just in which one wins out in the long run.
Well, I think if we want to take a look at what's been happening on the Star Wars side of it, the Favreau side is winning in that the the product produced is being accepted more widely. It, even though there are times it comes off as begrudging, but the critics enjoy it, and the fandom has, for the vast majority, been loving it. I mean, how many reaction videos were done to the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian, and how many people were genuinely thrilled, relieved, excited, and brought to the point of tears in a positive way at how Favreau and Filoni brought in a staple of the Star Wars franchise. It's kind of hard to disagree with how they brought in Luke into that storyline. I mean, we get to see Luke being the badass Jedi, or close to the badass Jedi that he was touted to be throughout the now Legends material that was the original expanded universe, which George Lucas was on board with accepting.
You're talking about the sequel trilogy, right?
No, we're talking about the books. The sequel trilogy is the Kathleen Kennedy run mistakes that have actually all but they tried to kill the franchise when you look at it. They tried to change it from what it actually was and got the backlash that it deserved. I mean,
Yeah.
So why would you intentionally? Well, are you that fucking jealous of a franchise that you're gonna try your quote unquote best to destroy it?
political statements. That is
Yep.
the problem that a lot of media companies face is you will get people in executive positions who have a chip on their shoulder for whatever damn reason they have it from their progression up through the ranks, that everything becomes their pet project. Everything has to have their stamp on it. Everything has to have their message to it, which Kathleen Kennedy was the one who came out with the shirt that, infamous or famous, however you want to view it, the Force is female. She wanted to get rid of Luke, Leia, and Han as the faces of the franchise and wanted to replace it with strong female characters, only to then try to fire one of its
I mean,
strongest.
if she wanted, well, exactly, if she wanted a strong female characters, what the fuck is wrong with Leia? Or what is that what is that girl's name from the Clone Wars, the TV show? Asuka?
Which
No,
one of
that's
them?
Ahsoka Tano.
Ahsoka, Padme.
yeah, the orange one. I don't know. I don't remember names.
Ahsoka.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a strong female character.
Well, and there's another thing. There is a long running narrative that your longer, more established fandom of both Star Wars and Star Trek don't like strong female characters. No, we don't like poorly written characters. There's a
Right?
difference.
There's a massive
I mean,
difference.
yeah.
Because it's interesting that Ahsoka comes up, because the actual showrunner, the actual creator behind that character, knew that the character, when it was introduced, was going to be hated. But that's what he wanted, because he actually had an actual story arc, an actual progression, actual growth of the character planned. That by time the series ended, Ahsoka was one of the most beloved characters from the franchise.
But wait, okay. So I need to ask this: why did he knew that she would be hated? Because I wouldn't.
Because
I'm
the
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
because the character was introduced and acted like an arrogant, unknowing punk at the beginning of the series.
Yep.
But that was the
Yeah.
see, you know what? That's genius right there because he knew there would get backlash. But as you said, he had this whole. You know what? That's well done. That's yeah. Okay. I can't add any more than that. That's genius.
Yeah. And that's what the most recent editions of Star Trek that have hurt the franchise have had. They haven't had the character driven story arcs with the same sort of veracity of the writing and quality of the writing. And Brandon, let me know which is the easiest way to DM you, because I would love to pick your brain about Picard, because I saw the end of that series coming from episode 4.
You mean season?
No, well, no. Star Trek Picard has only had the one season, 10 episodes. I knew what they were going to do with the character not even halfway through the season. I saw where it was going, and it was bland, it was predictable, and it was a poorly written show. And
I'll have to agree.
it mishandled so many characters that it tried to bring back in.
I mean, that's not really surprising. What? Didn't they? I don't know. Didn't they hate? I don't know. I remember you talked about this. Like a while ago. They're smoking, but there was, like, you know what I mean. You said they mishandled everything, which I remember you guys were talking about it, how badly it was. I don't remember the details, but
Well, yeah, there's a lot of what was established as continuity and the way the civilization and culture of the Federation was to be have humanity progress, that was thrown out the window in the latest versions of Star Trek. I mean, it was unheard of. It was a foreign dialect for anyone from the 23rd or 24th century to deal with someone using 20th and early 21st century vernacular. Star Trek 4. Kirk and Spock on the bus. After Spock knocks out the punk blasting his music as they're going across the Golden Gate Bridge, Spock asks him about the language that Kirk has started using since they've been back. And Kirk pointed out it was a different time. They spoke differently. You weren't taken seriously unless you used those colorful metaphors from time to time.
Reminds me a bit of a certain other movie with a certain very colorful president and a certain lawyer who was more interested in watching, ow, my balls, than actually doing his job.
Which movie? Because I don't really remember that.
Idiocracy.
Idiocracy.
Oh right, okay, yeah. They should have picked it up from. Yeah, got that movie. I haven't watched that movie yet, but the very premise scares me.
But that's kind of where Discovery and Picard are more heading.
I mean, that's kind of where the world's heading, but yeah.
But to quote one line from Star Trek Picard, the fucking gall.
No.
Or the sheer fucking hubris.
Yes, that was the line. A Starfleet admiral in the early 25th century is using the word fuck.
Why not?
After it's already been established that that type of language is foreign. I know. In Star Trek First Contact, they have run into Zefram Cochrane, arguably the father of where humanity ends up at their point. And at one point he said, I have to go take a leak. And Geordi had no fucking clue what he was talking about initially.
Yeah. But hold on, didn't correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Cisco say "damn" once or twice in Deep Space Nine?
He did, but that's the thing, is that level of exultation in the situations wasn't unheard of, because you still have lines like that from Bones throughout. The occasional "damn." You have the one instance of Data in Generations. Oh shit.
But to be fair, that was more just comic relief when it in a very extremely tense situation. So
Agreed. And he is new to the emotions. He is still coming to grips with the emotions chip being permanently fused to him.
I mean, sometimes I wonder whether it would be better to have no emotions at all, but then I'm like, yeah, okay, I like my emotions too much, even though they suck.
There's a give and take. There are certain aspects of humanity that you could never understand if you don't have the emotional wherewithal and the emotional connection there. It's a reason why Data has had such a hard time with humor up until that movie.
Yeah.
Granted, his character was great for comedic timing and everything leading up to that at major points, but the character himself never understood the joke, never understood why what had just happened was so funny.
One thing more to bring up in regards to language. Didn't Riker say hell on quite a few occasions.
Yeah, probably a handful of times throughout the entirety of everything. But you're getting subtle exaltations. You're not getting outright profanity. And I think that's more of the criticism, was that you have what would be considered crude, barbaric language being utilized in hell by Starfleet officers in the 23rd century for the bulk of Discovery.
So wait, does Picard and Discovery take place in the same time frame, or
Well,
no?
different time periods. So
That's what I meant.
yeah, so season 1 and 2 of Discovery take place 23rd century, prior to Kirk's 5-year mission on the Enterprise. So pre TOS, pre original series. They then use the ultimate MacGuffin and transport the entire ship 900 years in the future to the 32nd century, and still manage to fuck shit up there.
So they transport the ship 900 years into the future, beyond beyond all the stories of Star Trek Online, DS9, and all that. And how do they fuck it up? Oh, great! Wait. Jared is gonna.
So think about where this ship is coming from. The 23rd century. It is being met by 32nd century. And yet is somehow able to survive the barrage and actually be a viable candidate for upgrading to current century technology.
Yeah, that seems retarded. I don't know if I can use that word on here, but
You just did.
okay. Well,
I would say it is quite ridiculous. And granted, the space frame age is not that old at the time that the Discovery is brought forward in time. However, if this was actually going by what's established in canon, they weren't even using the LCAR system, let alone they were just barely getting to the beginning of the Duotronic Matrix computer systems. The Enterprise was upgraded during the series with the faster computer technology that actually Dr. Daystrom tested on the Enterprise, and actually it ended up causing a problem where the computer tried to take over the ship. But that's a different story for a different time.
Jesus.
But the Discovery predates that. But hey, we're going to upgrade the entire ship and bring it up to 32nd century level technology, including detached warp nacelles, yet they still manage to stick with the ship and are a viable transfer of the warp plasma to who cares about the tech side? That's already been established.
And see, that's one thing that kind of annoys me, and it's not just Star Trek. Like, for example, it's other ones where at least provide a brief overview of how something like that would work.
Well, part of the problem with that is each of the series up till now ended up actually having a technical manual go along with it. And thank you, Chris Kelling, for the $5 US. We'll get to that super chat in a moment. Each show has had its own tech manual that has gone along with it, where they've filled in a lot of the technobabble and a lot of those gaps and holes in the background. There hasn't been one for Discovery, and it's been a thing for a few years now.
I don't even think that was covered in the online game either.
Well, STO is beta canon at best.
Well, understandable, but it's a way to kind of
It could be if
bullshit.
it could be a great way to add in and flesh out a lot of these details more if CBS actually gave a flying fuck.
But you have one more issue there, Jared. If they were to actually write it down, it means that it's nailed down too. They can't just change it off the cuff. They have to stick to it.
Well, and that's my biggest criticism is the lack of consistency in the writing. But speaking of writing, Chris Kelling said TNG was Shakespeare. Kurtzman Trek is how many swears will CBS let get by? Yeah, it seems to be that way. Your
I haven't
pal,
even seen Lower Decks yet.
your pal Al asks, is Lower Decks the best currently running Star Trek series? I would say no. The Orville.
Yep.
The,
They would define
the
they would define currently running as potentially might have a or more seasons coming too.
Well, the Orville is the spiritual successor to Star Trek. Prove me fucking wrong. I dare you. And it is in production and is looking to maintain that way and does have the fandom support that has been lacking from Discovery and Picard. And Lower Decks is kind of in a weird in between because there is a lot of similarities that I saw between Lower Decks and Rick and Morty. That it really did come across like Rick and Morty dressed up as Star Trek.
Well, to be fair, it's Seth MacFarlane, so
Yeah, well, when one of the creative
Well,
team.
there's another show, Solar Opposites, which is basically Rick and Morty.
Well, and again, you have a similar thing there. You have a member of the creative team from Rick and Morty off doing their own thing. So I expected there to be those sorts of overlays, that sort of bleed over. And also, again, what type of adultish anime has been popular lately? Oh yeah, Rick and Morty. So why wouldn't they try to mimic that style?
Wait, you just called Rick and Morty an anime? Wow, what, Jared? What? It's not an anime.
It would be American anime, not Jap anime. Because keep in mind, you also have the Korean and Chinese versions too. Anime in general now has actually transcended just the localized Japanese.
No,
origin.
Jared, I know, it was a joke. You ruined that. Thanks.
But
poor timing.
eh, time.
Although to be fair, they did have a couple animated shorts or shorts in anime style, so those were interesting to watch.
And so did Halo, so
If they do want to go more with the animated route, though, they should take a page out of the Star Wars Clone Wars books, just in how you can make an animated show without making it just a kids show, and actually making it so that you have characters that you care for.
Well, and we're back to what I see as the root problem. Piss poor writing and no planning or overall vision that actually makes sense within the universe. It comes back to the writer's room and the executive production. I mean, Discovery itself, it started production, it started filming the series, it got halfway through principal filming of the entire season, and they got rid of the showrunner and replaced him. which is
It was
why
I'll be right back.
yep, which is why season 1 of Discovery felt like two halves of a show, because the first half was the best they could do with what they had from the initial production, and then it flipped to where the new showrunner took over and they were trying to fix it but still keep going with the story ish. And that's another thing. This is, I think, the biggest thing with that video from Generation Films that I disagree with, and I would intellectually smack British Ben upside the head with this. He tried to say that Discovery and Picard were too episodic in nature, and what Star Trek needed to do was go with a more serialized storytelling archetype.
Yeah, because that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, because those are the type of shows that have been getting the financial and critical acclaim. Game of Thrones, The Expanse, your newer series, that The Walking Dead, all of them have a defined overall story arc for the entire show that they're following, with little bits and pieces and little side stories that fill out the episodes as they're going along this longer story. British Ben tried to say that that's what Star Trek needed to do, and that Picard and Discovery were too episodic, like Trek has always been. I seriously have to question how much he actually watched either of those series.
I mean, hold on. Wasn't there an overarching plot in Picard and Discovery?
Yes, that is exactly my point. He is fundamentally wrong with his criticism and recommendation for fixing the franchise with that point he made. They were
I
not
actually go. Go.
they were not episodic in nature. They tried having an episodic tone to it, but it was still a serialized point A to point B to point C to point D, and each segment in between is its own episode.
I'd almost say say that looking at something like even Star Trek Enterprise, you still have that serialized nature. At least episode, or at least season 2 and 3, where they start getting into the meat and bones of it.
Yeah. But it was done well in that. Well, it was done better. The
A
problem,
bit out of order, but yeah.
yeah. But what I think really hurt Enterprise was when it was aired. It was coming on the tail end of TNG into DS9 into Voyager, with the end of the TOS crew movies and then the TNG crew movies going on at the same time. That time period, we had a massive amount of Star Trek material to consume as the viewers. And Enterprise came in on the tail end of that when people were getting burnt out. And they tried something new. And they tried putting it onto the same network that lovingly treated Voyager. And then it got moved to a different network. And then it got moved to a different network. And that relocation and the messing with the time slot of when it was being aired hurt Enterprise. And with the massive amount, which, spoiler for next week's topic, the massive amount of good sci-fi that we had at the end of the 90s into the early 2000s, Enterprise had a lot of stiff competition. A fucking lot of competition.
Yeah, and I think that Enterprise could probably have even won out on that had they moved it around a bit in order. First of all, switching season 3 and 4 so that the whole thing actually ended with the Cindy. Ended with, okay, here's the Federation. Here is how it all really started on this side.
Mm-hmm.
Because the premise of Enterprise, just being before the Federation, being before Trek as we know it really got its rules with the Prime Directive, etc., was a really novel idea. It was something that they could actually expand upon quite a bit. Just having things like, what do we really do here? What can we really do? What are we allowed to do that doesn't really, go against our morals? And that's something they could have done a lot more with had they only had the time.
Well, and that's the thing is, I don't think they got the time, partly because how they decided to take the story, but also it was facing a lot of competition and also a changing viewership style for media in general at that time. Because let's think about the sci-fi shows that people remember from say 98 to 2008, that 10-year period.
Lex.
You have Lex, you have Farscape, you have, I'm going to throw it in there. You have Firefly, you have Stargate, the entire Stargate franchise, SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe, which I still say was a good series, and I would like to see where it ended up after everyone went into stasis.
No, thanks. Spoiler alert, I haven't ever watched. Who's watching it?
Yeah.
Watch season 1. That was all I got.
Yeah, well, on Universe, you kind of saw where it was going and what they were facing and how it was that darker, getting closer to dystopian type because of the situation they were in. But again, there's a handful right there. Not to mention, you also had Andromeda. You also had a couple other reboot series that were getting attention. When they tried to relaunch V, and you had a
Early 2000s had a kind of sci-fi.
yeah, you had Babylon 5 thrown in there
Yeah,
too.
definitely. Yeah, when they were starting to try to get milk it some more, but that's 93.
Yeah,
93 to 98, I think.
yeah. So you have that. You had that saturation. You had that exhausting of the supply per se. So Star Trek taking the break that it did between Enterprise and the reboot movies on the JJ verse, it it needed it. It needed to take a break. Just like Doctor Who took a break. But therein lies the rub. When Trek came back, it wasn't exactly handled in the way that it should have been. Even by I want to keep calling it bad reboot, but it's bad robot. The JJ verse and everything we've gotten since. We have that aspect of it, and then we have.
Kill this guy? Hold on.
But then at the same time with everything, we have you have series that have started up in the meantime that have actually done quite well. Most notable one, The Expanse. But The Expanse is something different.
But with this, we almost have to get into what kinds of different sci-fi we have as well, and the way that they work within the universe itself.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. I should be able to, but I can't.
I wonder if Brandon's having a hard time hearing us.
Yeah,
Probably.
it almost seems like it.
How long do these usually go?
A couple hours or less. Because so for those who are unfamiliar, we talk about the subject right around 2 hours, depending on the topic, and then take a short break so I can have dinner before we kick up with VTW. So Veterans Talk Weekly will be following shortly after this, but yeah, dinner would be a good thing to have.
Hold on.
What's your address? I
Are you
sent you
doing all right,
DoorDash.
bro? Well, he's not.
Sorry, what
But
were
yeah,
you about to ask, Leon?
are you doing all right, Brandon? But yeah, I got my answer. But looking at a different TV series too, at the end of the 90s, you started getting proper sci-fi movies when the effect technology had actually started catching up with what people expected. Say, for example, 96 and forward, you have shit like Event Horizon,
Mm-hmm.
you have
Good
Independence
movie.
Day,
Also
you
good movie.
have Starship Troopers, you have The Fifth Element, you have all those things, and you really start getting into the, I guess you could call it high sci-fi, as in you have way more fantastical aspects in it rather than just something like Star Wars that's sci fantasy, or something like Star Trek that's mainly grounded sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
But you started getting more and more movies, and with the movies, you started getting way more series as well.
Yeah, well, and that's where when you look at the different offerings that were there, you could have a varied variations within the genre. It's never been a problem. It's just trying to make the series something it wasn't is part of what has hurt them. So when J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot came in and decided to start doing the reboot, it got a lot of latitude that I will agree. Discovery and Picard have not been granted the same amount of latitude. But part of that is because when the projects were announced, when they said, "Hey, we are rebooting Star Trek. It's going to be familiar names, but it's not going to be the original series as you knew it." They immediately set the groundwork that we are doing things differently. It's going to be in a different timeline. It's not going to be just a rehash of what we've already done. And with that, you get a lot of latitude. You get a lot of freedom to tweak, touch up, retry, readdress things here and there. But Discovery and Picard, they were adamant that this is prime universe, this is prime timeline, this is going to go right into the continuity of the rest of the franchise. They outright said that.
Speaking of that, though, we saw that episode with the Picard Day one, and the Picard Day banner. Just, I think it was 2 weeks ago now. The Picard Day banner isn't the same banner. The one in the actual episode is a slightly reflective type material. The one in Picard looks like, well, paper.
Yeah. And now, from a production side, I could have let that pass as it just being a arts department mistake. But when you add in a whole bunch of other things, like when Picard went to Starfleet headquarters and they had the holographic representations of the ships playing overhead.
And it's the wrong ships.
And well, no, the first one that they showed was correct. The Galaxy class Enterprise D was the known Galaxy class Enterprise D. But then they switch back to the NCC 1701 version Enterprise, and it's the Star Trek Discovery version. Not the
That
Cage
wasn't the
version.
only thing either, though.
Then you
The
have
shuttles.
Yeah, the shuttles. The shuttlecraft that were being used as taxis are the shuttlecraft from Discovery. Now, there's a fan conspiracy theory and also a legal, actual, all but admitted reason for the reuse of those assets. And it comes down to one thing: money. The producers of Star Trek Picard did not want to pay the royalties to utilize the existing assets of the older versions of what can now be collectively called Classic Trek. And that's also part of why Discovery got the massive amount of visual redesigns that they did, because they did not want to. So, for those who don't know, the Star Trek franchise, the actual intellectual property, has actually been split up between two camps for the longest time now, between CBS, Paramount, and Viacom. One group owned all of the assets and copyrights and everything for the TV based side of things. The other side owned all the movie rights and everything from that side of it. When Bad Robot came in, they were able to cut a deal with one, not the other. And being able to only cut the deal with one side of it came with the stipulation that they had to make significant changes to the visual stylings of what they were doing to prevent legal and financial restitution to the other side of the IP holder. Interesting facet, and with the fan base more conspiracy side of it, which I tend to agree with. Look at the events of First Contact, the movie. You have the Enterprise E going back in time and fixing damage caused by the Borg to try to, with the effect of making sure First Contact still happens in a way as close as possible to what they knew as the original events that took place. After that movie, you get a throwaway line from 7 of 9 in Voyager that the Borg were there and had a hand in First Contact with Earth and between Earth and the Vulcans. That was a lovely tie-in between the movie and the then still running series. However, as a fallout from that, you start to see technological deviations between shows and other instances that are supposed to predate TOS and TNG that do not technologically follow. Enterprise. That show. I've enjoyed it. I wasn't able to dedicate the time to watch it when it first aired, but I have watched the series a couple times over in the intervening years. It is a better series than a lot of people give it credit for. Yes, it has its criticism, and is deserving of criticism, as is every show. But it is not as bad as what it was played up to be at the time, and in a lot of people's memory sense. But because you see differences there, you see introductions of technology there that were completely new and not so much fantastical, but progressive when we are introduced to the 24th century in the Next Generation and throughout Deep Space Nine. But Enterprise and Discovery use those technologies as if, oh, no, we've always had that. So you get that deviation there, which goes into the thought process that because of First Contact and the temporal issues that resulted from that, Enterprise, Discovery, and Picard are not actually in the prime timeline, but are actually in that alternate timeline that stems from the Borg messing with First Contact. And that is a deviation point for the alternate timeline. And let's see,
I'd almost go so.
Go for it.
Go on.
Okay.
I'd almost go so far as to say that this is actually part of the Kelvin timeline I rolled to now with Enterprise. Because Captain Archer or Admiral Archer is only really mentioned in one place there. And his prize beagles.
Yeah. You have that aspect too, where the JJ verse could be an offshoot of that alternate timeline, because you get, well, or it could be the JJ verse could be in between though too, because you have a problem with the USS Kelvin itself. According to the way temporal mechanics are supposed to work, the Kelvin itself should have been more visually and structurally alike to the TOS aesthetic instead of what was then to follow. So that's where I could see the JJ verse is actually an offshoot of that alternate timeline, because the technology in the ships are larger. However, the Enterprise that is shown in the JJ verse, the Kelvin, those ships are significantly larger than the Discovery. So Discovery is closer in size to what has been considered canon and legacy for the TOS era ships, all things considered. But the JJ verse cranks everything up to 11. I mean, the JJ verse Enterprise is actually, if I remember right, as big or slightly larger than a Galaxy class.
I don't remember. I don't think it's Final Fantasy Galaxy class.
It's around that size, because it's, so the Constitution class is about a third-ish of the size of the Enterprise D, and the JJ verse Enterprise, depending on how you try to scale it consistently, is either 2 or 3 times larger than the refit style Enterprise.
Do we want to go into that case do we want to go into the technology in that case in regards to, if you look at the technology in the JJ word or JJ verse, you have a lot more crude technology, things that haven't been miniaturized, things that are way larger than they have to be.
Oh yeah, look at the size of the warp core.
Yeah, the entirety of the pumping station and all that shit on board of the ship with a concrete floor, but let's not talk about that. It reminds me a bit of the Foundation trilogy, when they compare the second Foundation with the first Foundation. One having a power plant that was literally, what was it, 4 or 5 stories tall in order to produce this amount of energy. The other one had something the size of a pea outputting the same amount of energy.
Yeah, you get a lot of, with technological advancement, you get a lot of miniaturization built in. Hey, we're now achieving this power cycle, but it takes this much size to do it. Well, then the next step of progression is maintaining the output while shrinking your footprint. And that's also plays into actually in canon the reason why the refit enterprise looked to be more spacious internally than initially, based off of the TOS era, the actual show era. But again, you have miniaturization. Like I've already said, the computer system and the control system of the TOS era Constitution class was not as advanced as the Duotronic and LCARS systems that end up getting into the refit and then the Enterprise A. So you see a lot of that miniaturization and things opening up space wise just in the Constitution class. But other than the refit, the external of the ship didn't get larger. And you have a massive, massive freaking problem with Discovery with that damn freaking fight scene through the turbo shafts. Oh, sorry, the turbo cavern.
What?
Oh yeah, in the most recent season, there was a fight scene very akin to one of the fight scenes in the remake of Total Recall, where
Ooh.
uh, the bestest ever Burnham and her boy toy are going after Orion pirates who have at that point taken over the ship, so they're trying to get control of the Discovery back. They're literally fighting them in and around a turbo lift as it's going through the ship, and it gets to this wide open, massive cavern that is about 2/3 the size of the ship itself.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost as big as the holes in the fucking storyline. Let's see what's it say here.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Wanting to see progression of what happened to Picard after Nemesis, it it had potential. The Picard series had a lot of potential. However, they made a number of mistakes in the character at as they were going out. So, think about it this way. How many times did Picard have to remind both Riker and Data, or whoever else was third in command, given the situation, that he was actually a rather qualified and much more than adept pilot? It happened a couple times.
Yeah, I remember that quite a few times.
But then in Star Trek Picard, he sits down at the controls of Rios' ship and looks like he's freaking clueless on how to pilot a ship.
Well, he is technically Picard. He's just the Picard from that one timeline that Q showed him.
Tapestry.
Yeah.
Which,
That fits so well into him.
if there was another Tapestry type moment, it would explain a lot. It would explain a whole heck of a lot. Uh,
You mean tying him back to that and actually seeing it as a moment where he saw himself as being capable of more? So
yeah,
after that, he actually started aiming for getting to captainhood.
you know what? Rex brings up the diagnosis that Picard had that they knew was going to show up in some way, but they never really got into how it would affect him. But even with the aromatic syndrome, it was the best they portrayed it is that at one at just at some point your mind is going to be gone and it's going to kill you, and it's a rapid progression. You actually see that later in the season. It's essentially how they try to wrap it up, but then they realize, wait, we can't just kill off our namesake and just leave him dead. Hey, remember that blank slate body that you just happened to have seen in the lab earlier in the episode? Yeah.
I still think that the best ending they could have had to that would be to see Picard sit at some home somewhere, just dreaming all this shit up.
That would have been tolerated so much more. But I have a better idea. Have Picard play a part in it. If we were able to clean slate, get rid of season 1 and redo it. Have Picard be a part of it. Don't be the racist fucks about the whole shit that happened on Mars with "Good morning, plastic people." No, fuck you. No, no. Horrible writing. Get the fuck out of the room. You're gone. Go back, redo the series. Start from the basics. Still have Picard die off, but it's an actual passing of the torch. And what we end up happening, Picard passes away shortly after christening a new ship that was named in his honor. And the series follows the exploits of that initial crew on that ship.
I could see that happening.
Then
if they would have done it that way.
Then you can keep the name of the show. You can keep Patrick Stewart around and have flashbacks and have him be a part of the series, at least in season 1 initially, in that way, where, let's say, the captain of the Picard was one of his junior or mid-level officers on the Enterprise D. And you get flashes of just little mentoring and little educational and advice type interactions between the two as they're going along there.
You also, there's another thing to throw in there is to keep them also in the series. Turn them into kind of like a EMH style thing, not necessarily the doctor or anything like that, but
Ooh,
what visors and shit.
I just had an idea for that. Have them be a subset of the computer system, to where instead of taking over for Michelle Barrett as the voice of the computer, have him be a command staff AI sounding board. That, I mean, they claim to have the technology to be able to map and archive human consciousness, so why not?
Do you want it to be like that, though? Or more have just holo recordings? Similar to what Wesley Stadd had.
You could do a little of both. You can have them recorded and have the pre-recorded situations, but you also need to have that adaptability of the program to be able to take in all the pertinent data and analyze it and then formulate a response. So it does need to be adaptable to be useful in this application. But using that framework of pre-recorded bits, like before getting to a solution, just have the pre-recorded bits be Picard asking about certain points of view and certain aspects of the situation, because your base template for how you gather your information isn't really going to change from situation to situation all that much. But the
Have you
responses
wa-
will.
have you watched iRobot, the Will Smith
Yep.
movie?
Yes.
Yep.
Do you recall Cochrane in that one? Oh wait, not Cochrane. What's his face?
Oh, I
With the helm.
yeah, I forget the character's name, but yeah, it's the same actor.
Yeah, he can take in information. You can ask things, but you can only get a set amount of actual answers. So you can get an answer like, no, that's not it. Or you can get an answer like, that's the kind of questions you should be asking. And more have him like a slightly less than magic 8 ball.
that that could work too. Well, but
Because
keep
the
it.
more. Hmm?
Well, here's my thought on it too. A blend of the two, you have that aspect to it. So as the program is gathering the information, it's doing that. It's it's playing that game, but then you could also use it to where it'll craft a more complete and thorough response and recommendation. And yet, you don't you have the crew, you have the commander not always take the recommended action and see how it plays out from there. Especially if they go back and say, I know you recommended to do this, but I did this instead and this is how it played out. And you have the programmed Picard look just go stern and like, you fucking did what?
Or just have a recording of. You remember Picard just dressing down Wesley. If you can't find it within yourself to. Oh, what is it? To stick to that, stick to those rules.
Then you don't deserve to be in that uniform.
Yep.
Or how about because you also have that stern and berating moment he had in in the actual episode named Lower Decks with the Bajoran ensign, who, come to find out, she got assigned to the Enterprise D because he specifically requested her after her graduation.
Yeah, and then she
Yeah,
didn't really make it much further.
we're not gonna get into that because the situation was kind of it was a dangerous situation that they ended up having to put her in. But it would have been nice to see that character go more. But at the same time, you're not really gonna introduce a entirely new-ish character in season 6 of a show that you know is only gonna be.
7.
We're in beginning of 7, yeah.
We have one more viewing left. Then DS9.
Yeah. Fuck, time flies.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're watching good shows. Maybe they should start writing better ones for CBS and get the viewership back.
But Jared,
Right?
they need to have a thing where if there's too much exposition, if there's too much of someone trying to explain something, you just hear a sound clip going. It just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic so that no one had a chance to interrupt. It was really quite
Hey,
hypnotic.
to go on to that same thing that Liam was talking about, also with that, could be the same thing what they did with in the last episode of SG1, the unending, where Sam was trying to kept trying to figure out the solution, and the Asgard just kept saying that function is not possible.
Mm.
And she eventually got so goddamn tired of them, he turned them off.
Yeah. Well, and that's another
Moving
thing.
back. Go on.
Stargate was. that show could have kept going. They actually managed to swap out
Atlantis could have
the
kept going too.
well. Just SG1 and let's just start with SG1. SG1 managed to replace the majority of its main core cast and keep going
Mm-hmm.
and not miss a beat. And then you have the offshoot of SG1. And again, you had major cast changes because part necessity of the story and part backstage stuff, but you still had major changes and tweaking to the cast
Mm-hmm.
that ended up being all story related, and it kept going.
And it was still good.
Yeah.
Now I will say this: when they dropped Samantha Carter for in favor of everyone's most hated person in Stargate Command, um, Woolsey, that kind of threw me off with season 5. I still watched it, still enjoyed it, but I didn't like Woolsey, even though there was about time they fell into the character arc for him.
Hmm.
Going back to though the whole thing with British Ben and his fixes for the whole thing, including the whole okay, yeah, but you have some episodes with this character, some episodes with that character, and then they just coalesce at the end to find some big baddie. I'm not sure if he was joking there, but that's pretty much what every fucking series like that has been doing for a long time now.
Ever since the MCU kicked off and started getting the traction and success after the first Avengers movie, people started realizing, oh, that's what you were working up to. That's what you were doing. I'm going to do it too.
And it's fucking boring now. The best part about Star Trek weren't the parts where, oh yeah, let me grab a phaser and just shoot something. The best parts were when you were faced with a moral conundrum that no matter what you choose, you're going to get fucked over or you're going to fuck others over. And you had to make sure that not just that you had to make a choice, but that you could live with that choice. Take the fucking the episode with the junkies. Well, one planet was pretty much just delivering drugs to the other planet.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, and it ends up with Picard saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, we'll take the drugs there, or we'll help you take the drugs there, but we can't give you those spare parts." Well, why not? Our ships will stop working. Well, sad to say, that's not really my issue. And he knew that no matter what happened there were going to be more issues. There was most likely going to be a war. There was going to be blood spilling all over the place due to the way that the drugs or the junkies there had been treated all those years. But it was needed. He knew that it was needed. It couldn't just keep going. And that's pretty much those are the best moments of Star Trek, where you know that a hard decision had been made, but it's the journey to actually seeing how to come to that decision and how you deal with it. That's the important thing.
Well, and I think that's what comes back to the whole difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. Star Wars is very much a space opera, a an action epic. It is much more about the events that take place, whereas Star Trek is very cerebral, very introspective, very much not just what are you doing, but why are you doing it? Are you doing it for the right reasons, or are you doing it for other nefarious reasons? And that's where I see what's been going on with Star Trek as an more indicative of the overall degradation of competent storytelling and writing from the major media in general, just outright. I mean, you have so many offerings that are more concerned with pushing a political statement, a transformative, in your face, preachy fucking mentality disguised as entertainment, when really it's the writer saying, I'm better than you because you're doing this that I see as wrong, and I'm going to show you how it's wrong.
I think that's also what. Go on.
Well, it's and one place that this in particular has been happening. If you really go and take a look at it, Batwoman. So far,
I'd rather not look.
oh, if you don't want to look at the show directly, but if you are a bit of a sadist and want to see someone hurting themselves in different ways intellectually and biologically with copious amounts of alcohol, go watch As from Heel versus Babyface. Every week he reviews the Batwoman series. Each episode he does one video actually picking apart the episode, and then he follows it up with a video talking about the ratings and how that episode particularly may or may not have affected said ratings. But he has noticed something in season 2 of that show. Ever since switching from Ruby Rose as Batwoman to essentially a random lesbian of African American descent as Batwoman now, there has yet to be an episode where your straight male Caucasian was not at least associated with the bad guy in the episode.
That's just sad.
Yeah. And there's more aspects to the season-long story arc that's going on there that are just written by an idiot is the best way I can describe it. You have major events that are happening, major plot points that are taking place that just don't have the logical connection between them. It's sad that this is the state of a sizable chunk of entertainment media out there. A lot of these sources of entertainment, they are supposed to be a bit of escapism. They are supposed to let us decompress and forget about whatever mess, whatever stress and everything we're dealing with in our actual lives for a moment. That's why it's entertainment. You can use entertainment to educate subtly and breach ideas of a more progressive nature subtly and tastefully and impactfully. But you have to be a competent writer in order to do that. And that is actually one thing Star Trek has been at the forefront of up until a few years ago. It has not lived up to the history that is behind the name Star Trek.
That's actually something that was touched upon earlier too. There is one show that has taken up that mantle, and the name of that show is The Orville. They have started taking up the mantle of, we don't want to beat you over the head with this. We want to show it. We won't tell you to make one decision one way or another, but we want you to see it. We want it to be something where you don't just push away the thing that you find uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, and that's why I said early on, The Orville is the spiritual successor to Star Trek. I mean, Seth MacFarlane is an admitted Star Trek fanboy. He even showed up in Star Trek Enterprise as a very minor character. And it was because
A
he
very
had,
baby-faced character too.
yeah. And it's because he enjoyed the series, and it's also part of why he will make fun of it. He does not see it as the perfect franchise. Neither do I. There are problems, there are mistakes, there are missteps throughout. Doesn't mean it's not a good show. Doesn't mean it doesn't have its moments of impeccable and amazing writing. But there is one thing that British Ben brought up that I think would be rather interesting to consider. If a way to save the Star Trek franchise, pick the brains of someone like Ira Stephen Bear, or those still available and accessible from Star Trek at its peak in the heyday, end of TNG through DS9 and beginning of Voyager. Pick their brains a bit. And then do a series centered around Garrick. Just simple old Garrick. Think about where that show could go.
That'd be pretty cool.
I know where it could go, but I know where it will go in today's climate.
And that's the
Which-
problem.
Actually, no, the problem is people trying to bring in old characters and then applying what the actors and people today think about those characters. Say someone like LaForge. If he were to be seen today, he would be seen as a rather pathetic womanizer, pretty much only being able to find someone to love in the holodeck. And that after having them more or less just suited towards him. However, if you want to look at it from how he worked himself as a character throughout the show, yeah, he grew as a character. You didn't see more of his love problems, but you saw that he was actually a competent character. He was competent in other ways than, off duty. And that's something where you could actually work off that. But if you want to do that today, people would go on about, oh yeah, but he's horrible with women. He's such a sexist. And you have to make it so that he fights for, I don't know, black people's rights, despite that not even being an issue in that area of Star Trek. It would be about those things. It wouldn't be about what has he learned? What kinds of things has his different outlook, quite literally, on life, given him when it comes to experiences? It wouldn't be about him as his character. It would be about everything else.
Yeah. And that's the thing is you have the overreactionary, overly political, ass backwards climate and viewing that has invaded and infested a lot of entertainment media, because you can actually open up and talk about and tackle a lot of the issues that a lot of people are putting forth without being disrespectful to any of the individual persons involved. Like, that characterization of LaForge would be very, very disrespectful to him as a person, the character as a person. Because when you look at it, LaForge he was cut out to be in engineering. At some point, I think you knew from the beginning that he was eventually going to become the chief engineer, just with the way his character was. And I can speak from experience. The vast majority of people in engineering fields have a very difficult time relating with people. It's We are more technical savvy. We are very intuitive from a mechanical, electrical, structural standpoint. The flesh is weak and people are messy.
Oh no, he has the knack.
Yes, yeah. That clip from Dilbert is not wrong.
Very much not so. But that being said, though, the best way now, in order just to to revitalize the entire Star Trek franchise, would be to say, fuck these characters, fuck trying to use the old actors, we start anew. You have something where you don't take the discovery route of, we're going to make something new in an era that this doesn't really fit into because alternate timeline. You then try to do like Picard, where you have old characters that, well, both the actors and the way that the characters work in the show don't fit in with the rest of it. You take Prime Timeline somewhere around, oh, let's say 80 years after the events of Voyager, where things have started to calm down. Things are now slightly less messy, and you can start getting into, like I say, the temporal wars. You can start getting into those things that have been slightly opened before, but not actually delved into much deeper. You can take the events that happened before and just extrapolate what's happened. Is the Klingon Empire actually still there? Is the Klingon Empire having a comeback with people being able to, or with the people who aren't just warriors, being able to have more positions in society? Are the Romulans starting to get really fucking fed up with the government? Are the Cardassians starting to actually be more peaceful with how many were damaged during the war?
And with the Cardassians and with how many are turning to peace, are you going to have an offshoot faction that wants to go the extreme opposite route and think, no, 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 more might and military action is the answer, not less?
Yeah, you can make it really interesting that way. Because even with the way that we've seen the Cardassians now, and the way that we've seen them throughout DS9, there are many Cardassians who are so tired of all the war. They're so tired of having to sacrifice their children, their siblings, themselves, for something that they do not actually believe in themselves. Have it so that you have, or Cardassians have turned into a majority peaceful people, with that warring faction there that you mentioned too, but have them be a a force more for good than anything else. They might be diminished. They might have lost a lot of their territories through voluntary action. But have it so that you get to see this from a completely different perspective now. You get to see the Klingons where they start to actually respect their scientists. You get to see the Romulans where you have more and more Romulans who are actually willing to do things above the table. You have actually, let's even get into the fucking Vulcans because they are kind of annoying. Vulcans being shown as being the conspiratorial pieces of shit that they actually are. And just have them being shown as they aren't actually, that nice. They're not that good of a people. They do have a lot of shit going on.
There's a lot of nuance and subtlety there, which is one of the reasons why my nomination for best episode in Enterprise was actually where you started to see that side of the Vulcans and where you were also introduced to Shran. And you start to get probably the most reluctant yet awesome friendship ever in the history of Star Trek between Shran and Archer.
Yeah, the monastery episode.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing. Using a monastery to cover up your espionage and spying station. Yeah, that's what the Vulcans did.
And it is a very Vulcan move too, because it's logical. Why wouldn't you? Vulcans are pretty much just, well, Vulcans are Romulans. But with a stick so fucking far up their arse, you can see it every time they speak.
Ah, yes. So much so that Rogel Dorn would even be happy.
Yep. Well, just looking at it, looking at the way that this has evolved, and I know that Enterprise isn't really, it isn't prime timeline, but still, you have these events. You have the possibility, you have the ability to take these things, to remake them into something new. 70 years on a galactic scale can make a massive difference.
Yeah, well, so Davros out there is trying to say that utilizing Pajem as a listening post is not logical. No, I agree that it completely is because you're looking for utter concealment. What better way to cover and distract away from prying eyes than the use of highly sacred, highly restricted access religious artifacts and a religious location? And also, let's look at the location of Pajem in relation to Andor Prime. It was in a wonderfully close proximity to actually gather a lot of information from where they were at. So there was strategic value to its location, and it also had a plausible cover story built in to deflect away from too many prying eyes. It's just human curiosity doesn't get deterred so easily.
No.
And that's where one more trait of the Vulcans come playing in: arrogance. They are arrogant as all fuck towards the humans, towards every other species, especially the humans and Andorians.
Yep. So
I remember that
5.
being I remember that being a big contention in because I didn't get a chance to watch a little bit of Enterprise, and that was one of the things that was put on blast in like the first couple episodes.
Are you having fun over there? Fucking dog. Oh, but $5 Australian from Digital Demonic Davros. How many Arns till the end of this cycle? get a better script, Star Trek. See, that's what we've been. Well, that's what I've been saying for years now. The writing and the scripts on Trek have to get better. That's why the franchise is on life support. That's why it hasn't been getting the ratings that it once did. The writing and the direction and what they are trying to do with the series sucks and is of such poor value. A goddamn fan fiction was out drawing it, so much so that CBS had to sue them into damn near oblivion to get them to stop. But Axanar is still coming. They are still producing it. Just not the full feature length film that they were initially working on, which would have been so amazing.
But with the script writing now, I can go take a shit and write a better 45-minute script for a Star Trek episode involving two people in a room than what they put out in Picard, in Lower Decks, in fucking STD. That shouldn't be. It shouldn't be possible. You should not be able to do things like that towards 3 installments in one of the most popular sci-fi franchises ever. And they just suck so much that you can still do it. I mean, you could get someone who's fucking high off the ras and halfway fucking dead drunk, and they'd still come up with a better script.
Actually, that's probably what happened with Picard, is that they were relying on the chemical support a little too much.
I more have a feeling that the operating term here is soggy biscuit, where everyone just threw everything out there, and the last person just had to eat it.
That's quite a way to describe it, and probably not far off from what actually happened.
Well, there's going to be a loser either way, and considering that most of the stuff there seem to just, fire away with all the fucking ideas and other things right away, so you had a huge mishmash without any kind of, taking away what didn't fit in.
Rex does bring up a good point. They did use a couple fan written scripts in TNG. But the thing is, they were still well written and they had to be approved. And I don't know if it's just the writer's room that needs to be fixed with the shit we've been getting, or if it's the show running, or both. I'm leaning both.
Not very much both, and sadly, giving actors too much controls of their characters nowadays. It was an issue in the beginning of TNG that some actors didn't have enough control. Now, with shit like fucking Patrick Stewart, he has too much control over the script. And we've seen in interviews already what his idea of a script is. When he takes off his shirt and turns into some kind of action hero.
Oh, Davros.
I'm not wrong.
Yeah, Davros, you're not wrong there, except instead of hugs, it's crying fits. Well, if you're watching Discovery. Either hysterical, uncontrollable, manic laughter, or tears. There really is no in between. And see, that is one huge red flag on season 3. Any medical officer in Starfleet or in any situation, that entire crew would have been taken off active duty and put into heavy therapy until they individually got the clearance that, yes, you have dealt with the trauma of what you've just been through. now you can go about business as a normal uh, Starfleet officer going forward. They would not get thrown back into the fucking fire like that just because, ooh, fancy ship we haven't seen before. Ooh, fancy drive type that we know about but don't know about but know about but shouldn't know about. Yeah, just fucking MacGuffins all over.
Wouldn't it be fun though if it just so happened that, let's say, certain crews got transported back in time and just happened to stumble upon some fucking Colombian nose candy to the point that they all died of heart arrest?
Mm. Or how about throw them towards the event horizon of a supermassive black hole and see what happens and tell them to report their findings?
Will we need to have a Stargate nearby?
But not too close.
Just close enough to get footage.
It just close enough that whenever they are pushed out the other side, it's enough to get them into the gravity well, but the Stargate itself doesn't go into the gravity well.
I'm fine with that. Or, if we can find a black hole, just, I don't know, drop it into the sun or something. That works too.
No, yeah, that was quite effective. Although you got to be careful when you're trying to get away from it, though. It might mess with your propulsion a little bit.
A couple of thousand light years here or there. Doesn't really matter too much. Now, I feel like if they want to really get back on track now, they would support fan projects instead. Take things like, you mentioned Axonar there. You
Oh,
take things like that and you actually shove some money into it.
oh,
You take fan project.
that was part of the problem. Axonar got the money, and CBS was pissed because the fan base in general, overall, the fan base was excited for what they were getting glimpses of from the Axonar project. But at this point, they'd already started leaking things out about Discovery, and people are like, "Yeah, no, that we love this. This is what we want to see." And it wasn't the CBS offering. I mean, the group that was making Axonar, they got enough to make a complete, legit production studio out of it. And that's part of why CBS went after them. Because they were getting so many donations, and you had so many people who were veteran actors of Star Trek agree to be there and to help the project because they knew it was something special. And rather than do arguably the smartest thing and come in and buy it up and start funding it directly and make it legitimate canon, CBS tried to stop it. And that's where they went wrong. That's when CBS started to really lose the support of a lot of fans, is how they saw something as a threat instead of an opportunity.
That always reminds me of someone. I think that they usually have a stylized eye on their clothes. Something, I don't recognize this, I don't like it, I want it gone.
The Inquisition, what a show.
No one expects the Imperial Inquisition.
Thank you. I have that entire scheme playing in my head.
Oh, imagine that crossover. You take the musical number from History of the World, but instead of Mel Brooks and and other monks, it's all orders. It's all members of the Inquisition, specifically the Ordo Hereticus.
Mm.
Oh! And instead of the synchronized swimmers, Sisters of Battle.
With or without the power armor?
Both.
I'm okay with this. I can get behind these.
I will not
Probably
be
not
on
for long,
BTW tonight because I will be dealing with a massive fucking headache.
Wow. Well, it's not that bad, but see, that's the thing. We can be here shooting the shit and come up with these ideas that, admit it, all you fuckers out there would rather see that than what we've gotten from a lot of the Hollywood offerings lately.
That's beside the point. The only big movie I'm waiting on is the third Jurassic World movie. So
Yeah, but even that has been underwhelming. I will say this: there was a movie that my wife recommended we go see, and we actually went to the theater and saw it, and I was thoroughly impressed. I'm gonna have to give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull up the actual title name. It was a wonderfully messed up yet glorious premise and very well done. Uh,
That's a very long title.
no, that's not the title. I'm no, no, not mall. I want movie times. Because
Darth Maul.
I'm pretty sure it's still in the theaters. Come on. No, it's not that. That's new.
Speaking of new, and while you find that, there are other things to avoid while making sci-fi movies, etc. One of them being completely foam armor, where you can tell it's foam armor and it wiggles around.
Oh,
right?
God. We did not even finish that movie.
I got
And
halfway through.
What movie was this one?
Cosmic or Galactic or something sin.
Cosmic Sin.
With Bruce Willis. And it's so fucking bad.
They literally had foam armor.
A foam armor that wiggled. It wiggled.
Just foam armor is. Yeah, just foam armor in and of itself isn't really an issue. When you have foam armor with long struts that are supposedly, they're going to be attached to something else, but they aren't, so they wiggle around. That's an issue. When you've painted it so it looks like cheap plastic, that's another issue.
So in other words, worse than a B movie.
Yes, it was. At least as far as we saw it.
Yeah, it was worse than a B movie, and yet it had a low A level cast. That is.
Are we talking like Dragon Ball Evolution style cast or? worse?
So
It had Bruce Willis.
I
yeah,
didn't quite catch that.
yeah. Bruce Willis was the headliner of it. Okay, did I not? Did I delete that?
And he wasn't able to carry the movie by
Ah,
himself.
here we go. The name of the movie
He
was
was
the name of the movie that I saw recently that was actually really good is Promising Young Woman. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not even going to hint at what it's actually about. But if you have an inkling for watching a good movie that will really take you for a ride, go watch that.
well. There's Wednesday coming up.
We can see if it's available for streaming. It might
It
be.
is.
Oh, you've already looked.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. If you're interested in seeing that movie, see that description box below the player thing on the website or app you're watching this on. Yeah, you'll see a link to a Discord server in there. Go ahead, click that link, and then you'll be able to join us for watching that movie on Wednesday and any of the other randomness that we have going on. And speaking of the randomness that we have going on, it's time to take a break before we go back on air with the wonderful eclectic stylings of Veteran Stock Weekly, where who knows what topics are going to come up, especially seeing as how I kind of put the bug out there for those who have read the title and description. Yeah, it's story time this week. Let's see what stories people can come up with, because holy hell have there been a couple of doozies that have come out into the media lately that I think we can address in rather phenomenal fashion. Fashion being the understatement of it all. Which, ooh, reminds me, we should get a hold of Mariah Vegeta, because she was rather opinionated on one of the topics that
You
is
think?
sparking this. Oh my god. She was the one who brought the first one to my attention. It's like, oh boy, okay, note to self. Mariah Vegeta, do not piss her off. With that, good night. If this is where you're calling a night, great. We'll see you when you come back around. Everyone else, we will see you in a little over a half hour. Until then.
Goodbye.
Bye.